we needed to learn to live with churn, with a very high churn rate, which was not the case before. Before, we were living with the exact opposite.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back in 2024 on Retention Zone, the video podcast focused on monetizing streaming and fighting churn and increase customer retention. I'm happy to have the first episode this year with my friend Sebastien Audoux, who spent many years at Canal+. So let's see, from pay TV to streaming, what is the same, what is different. But first, Sebastien, introduce yourself to my Retention Zone audience, please.
Hi, everyone, and Happy New Year. Yeah, I mean, you've mentioned me being at Canal for quite some time. Yeah, I've spent around 20 years working at Canal+, first as a sport journalist, and then went on to run all the golf operation, including a dedicated golf channel, before enjoying another career on the digital and OTT streaming side, handling everything from the sports experience within the OTT app to social media to a lot of original content that we built specifically to keep people interested in being in our new OTT app, which is my canal.
So let's start from pay TV was clearly a moment where, in Europe, because clearly the American market is a bit different, the concept of a subscriber and everything you have to do to acquire and retain subscriber was, if you want, center stage beyond the content, etc., correct? So if you compare it to today, and then we may go in more detail, how you see it playing different between a traditional pay TV model and a streaming model, a spot model?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it's basically the business that's changed. I mean, when we were mentioning OTT changing everything, I was always a bit surprised, because basically we went from, using satellite and cable to going over the top, but by basically selling the same type of offering with the same type of channel. Obviously, SVOD came in the picture, but outside of that, there were little change to the way we were handling the business. But obviously, with the arrival of the dedicated player in that area, like Netflix and Amazon Prime Video and so on, the market really changed and became much more difficult. I mean, if I talk from my experience with Canal, I left Canal in February of last year. For a long time, it was mostly satellite, and then you were getting a Canal Plus subscription. You were getting that satellite dish, and then basically you were chained to a Canal Plus offering until the end of times. And that was, I would say, not an easy business, but much easier than it is today, where suddenly there are so many different players on the market, so many different offerings. Obviously, in sports, we had that issue with all this competition that led to sports rights being much more fragmented, that you needed like 10 different subscriptions to watch football, for example, which led to, I guess, everybody being in somewhat of a trouble. And it was very, very difficult to basically change the business enough so we could tackle those new challenges without hurting too much the main business that most of the pay TV operator in Europe are still doing, which is selling, long-term monthly subscription.
Mm-hmm. So basically what you're saying is, in theory, from a pure, if you want, marketing and direct-to-consumer marketing and sale, it's a similar model, meaning you sell a subscription to someone, but in the past, churn was more difficult to obtain from a consumer point of view.
Yeah.
And maybe the offering, even if fragmented, especially in sport, was not so rich. Now, obviously, it's easier. I was talking to even people in our industry saying, okay, with the family, we want to follow a series. We don't want to spend too much. We are on Netflix for 3 months, and then we take Disney, but then we leave the other service. So this kind of hopping from one to the other is something that clearly wasn't possible before, right? So there is more fluidity. On the other end, I think the concept of churn and retaining customer I think there are some techniques that are coming from e-commerce that are kind of similar. Did you see, I mean, the mentality of people you were working, the mindset of people you were working with going from pay TV to streaming change a lot, or there's a lot of lesson learned in pay TV that are useful today in terms of, the marketing and sale part?
Yeah, well, I guess the main thing is that we needed to learn to live with churn, with a very high churn rate, which was not the case before. Before, we were living with the exact opposite. So basically, it was more about trying to grow the subscriber base, by, trying to get new stuff that will interest people that are not subscribers, which was getting obviously harder and harder because you had a much more mature business after a while. Now suddenly the priority is not getting new subscribers, is keeping at any cost the subscribers that you have. That was the first thinking. But then we realized that, okay, well, that's not really an option because people are gonna be leaving. So we're gonna live with churn. So basically, it's suddenly a never-ending roller coaster where we need to get subscription with any type of new offerings or new content with any deals that we can, and try to keep up with this ever-changing market where, again, before nothing, in my career at Canal, for the first basically 15 years, we had one merger with our main competitor, which was TPS at that time.
Yes,
we acquired them. And that was basically the only big disruption that I've seen in my first 15 years. And then suddenly it became, really crazy, which was fun for me because I was just at the same time, that was the time that I was moving from traditional linear TV to digital and OTT. So it was very much fun for me. I can tell you that it was not much fun for the people running marketing and so on, because suddenly everything was much, much harder.
Yeah, one of the way to I visualize in my mind what you said is, I just saw yesterday a great and it's good, so I'm not being bad about it, a big announcement from Sky saying, yeah, we have DAZN now.
Yeah,
in Switzerland. So in 10 years ago it would be, what? That's crazy, right?
Yeah,
so
yeah, because I remember
difference.
I can tell you, I remember when because I was obviously following that very closely, and the first few years I was mentioning DAZN, I had people looking at me, what is this? I mean, why are you mentioning that? Because nobody was really thinking of that as a power player in the industry. And same thing happened when they decided to enter the market. Obviously, I think they did a very smart deal on both sides with Canal. And now suddenly, I mean, you need to have DAZN is somebody that you kind of need to be working with and have that in your offering, because otherwise you might have a gap in your bundle, because that's what it is. I mean, we went from debundling to rebundling. And now it's, when you've seen the strategy at Canal, it's basically the same with Sky. I mean, it's all about signing those big deals with other players in the industry, whether it's Disney Plus, Netflix, The Zone, to add those, even Apple TV Plus in the case of Canal Plus, and have those in your offering, because at some point, you can feel that there's a bit of subscription fatigue, too many offerings, too many struggle to keep up with that, and then at some point there's a quite comfortable way of consuming content by having still quite a big offering, which is not as cheap but probably easier to handle, as long as you have the money, because when you're doing that, obviously you are targeting more premium consumer, and it's those were always the easiest, I should say, compared to the younger demographics that are again more willing to churn and more willing to, again, as you said, more, I'm going to watch this show on Netflix, then I'm going to unsubscribe, and then I'm going to subscribe to, I don't know, maybe Apple TV Plus to watch the MLS. But when the season is over, I'm going to get rid of the Apple TV Plus subscription. And then I'm going to start another subscription to maybe in France we have a dedicated basketball OTT platform called Squid. Oh, maybe I'm going to subscribe to Squid because I want to watch a bit about basketball, but just for 2 months towards the end of the season.
And as you mentioned that in all this clear, world that is transforming in streaming, in media and streaming, what is today, what is today the role of sport? Is it still, and we have deals just happened in the last 3 to 6 months that are giving so the direction of the trend is going one side and the other side. And I think Europe and America and the States is a bit different. So how do you see sport being still instrumental or crucial for this kind of dynamics?
Yeah, I think it's still crucial, but I think it's interesting to see, and I think in many ways, traditional pay TV learned a lot from the fact that unlike previous newcomer in the industry, for example, when we've seen telcos trying to do content, suddenly whether it's BT in the UK or Orange in France, they suddenly came gun blazing, acquiring a lot of rights for insane amounts because they wanted in on the market. And then we were fearing that the Amazon and Netflix would do the same, and they didn't. They were actually very smart with their money, trying to, I'm Amazon, I'm going to try and get, those Boxing Day matches in the Premier League, and then I'm going to make a good deal in France by, getting a huge discount on the League One after the Media Pro fiasco. And we're going to try and get a lot of small deals like that. And suddenly everybody realized that unlike what we previously thought, maybe we should start thinking about sports as any other type of content. What's the direct ROI on that? Before it was seen as so important that, we need that whatever the cost. Because if we don't have that property, we're going to die. And that was the case, for example, with Canal Plus, with League One, where suddenly they learned that they could live without League One, which was unlike they previously thought for about 20 years. And it's not so much about League One, is that suddenly you understood that it's not about one piece of content, one league. You can live without that if you do not find the proper, ROI around a property. You're going to cancel a show if there's not a direct ROI. Previously with sports, it was a bit different. Now, I don't think it is. I think everybody is looking at that in a much more, business, oriented way, which I think makes the life of, rights owner a bit difficult at the moment, because suddenly nobody is willing to spend, a crazy amount for nothing. It needs to have a business purpose.
Yeah, if we take, and again, let me try to do it with what I remember. If we take Europe, Seriali deal without the big tech and not crazy, so whatever, amount of money not beyond the expectation for sure. Premier League the same, and Sky present on both ends. I think the state is very different. MLS Apple for sure. We'll see what happens with the NBA. NFL is doing deal with Amazon, with everybody. So big tech super present and growing, maybe because they're American companies, they understand better American sport. I don't know. So I see they're kind of diverging a bit, Europe. And at the current, Amazon is out of tennis, Amazon is out of Champions League, if I remember well. So I see the market a bit diverging, but maybe then something happens and it's not the case.
No, yeah, I agree. And the market at the beginning, before this incoming money from streamers and so on, was already a bit different. I mean, there were a big transition in Europe in the 90s, where most of the sports went from free to air to pay TV. And suddenly everything was behind a paywall. Unlike in the US, you still see a lot of sports on free to air, and you have a very resilient and very important local market, especially the big, Los Angeles and Chicago and New York markets that are very important in the sports business, which obviously is something that we don't have in a domestic country by country market in Europe. But again, if you're coming to Amazon, it's not like they suddenly break the bank on the first NFL deal. The first, went, okay, we're going to see, how can we, really do stuff with the Thursday night slot. But they had, they had a traditional linear broadcasters plus Amazon. So not too risky, not too expensive. And then I guess at some point, everybody was comfortable to say, okay, well, if Amazon is handling that on their own, we know that obviously they have the money. Amazon was comfortable because they knew that they could probably find some sort of ROI around that. And then the deal happened. I guess it's much more complex in Europe for many reasons. And you can see that Amazon is, which I think is good for the market. They are looking at what they're doing and assessing, okay, well, we've tried that. It's not working for us. We're going to stop. That's as simple as that. Unlike many years ago with traditional pay TV, probably you had to go through a few cycles before, or having some sort of competition to suddenly realize, I mean, do we really need that property, or do we really need all the games? Or something that I'm very interested in terms of sports is to me, the main reason rights were going up before was the exclusivity part. You needed that on an exclusive basis. I don't think that's the case anymore. I think you could basically, which I think is one way of achieving growth for the rights owners, is that you can basically sell the same thing multiple times. Because you can have maybe, I don't know, a global partner with a streamer, and then also have a domestic partner in a few markets. That makes sense. And exclusivity is not as big of a premium as it used to be. So again, I think those newcomers brought a lot of sense into a market that was a bit crazy.
And going back to wrap up, I think going back to your statement, which is possibly the first time I hear on one of these now 12 episodes, is churn is inevitable. In one sense, I understand you have to realize that the scenario is different.
It will never be the same.
Obviously, you have to, on one end, you have to do something about it, because instead of being that level of inevitable becomes what kills you, because it's like you have a vase of water and there is a hole at the end. So if you can pour water, but if you don't solve the hole, it's more. I think the way I read it is more understanding that it's much more sophisticated to understand the dynamics of churn and how you can win back customers. Is it based on, whatever, the content or the offering or the price? So I think why I'm doing this and why it's so interesting, because I spent the last 5 years in a bit on this area, and it's incredibly sophisticated. And innovation is, normally you put the customer at the center in a true way, not as, when you do it in this slide to any presentation, fun-centric, customer. This is a reality. If customer is not at the center, you're in trouble. But then you have to constantly be sophisticated enough to understand what's going on and why people are churning, and find ways to win them back or avoid them churning. I think that's why I care.
Yeah, I guess, and the important part is that one of the good sides, obviously, of the OTT is that you have a lot more data on your consumers, that the ones that you have in traditional television, or where you had the traditional ratings polls and so on, which would give you a very little information on your overall subscriber base. So now suddenly, I mean, at first we probably had too much data because it was a bit overwhelming. So we took traditional pay TV operators probably a while before, really being able, building, data teams and so on. I've been through that, and being really able to, again, look at the consumer in a much more, deeper way, trying to understand, okay, well, what we can do to not prevent churn, but at least limit that to a level that is livable for us.
And I think it's you said it correctly. It's about the data platform you use. It's about the tools you use and the practices and the intelligence you put on top of the data, because otherwise it's just a lot to manage, and the actions you take. I think it's a combination of the data you collect or you have available, how you create insights, and how you can make those insights actionable. Otherwise, you're passive, and I don't think it's the moment where being passive is make you survive.
Yeah, I do think so. And plus, the other thing that I'm a huge believer in is that I think it's you cannot just live with the traditional, subscription model. You need to find new monetization model. I think it's very interesting what the Zone is trying to build around, having a global, sports platform that is much more than a traditional OTT platform. It's all about, also being able to have betting in there, being able to buy sporting goods, with Fanatics, very interesting deal as well.
Yeah.
So you can see that they are transitioning from, okay, we're going to have this subscription-based sports platform, so-called the Netflix of sports, to something that is much more than that. Again, I was a big fan of the Buzzer and Recast experiment, for example, because I'm a huge believer. And for years, I've worked on so many pay-per-view projects in my career. And when you are in a traditional pay TV, you never want to do that because you feel, okay, well, if we do that, we're going to basically hurt our main business, because if you start selling games by the unit, you're going to lose a lot of subscribers that you're getting just for that today. So that was always the case of, okay, we want to do that, but we don't really want to do that. But microtransaction, coming to my example around gaming, I think kids today are much more used to spending, a lot of money, in games, buying, stuff through the life cycle of the game. It's a way of spending money that I'm not used to and that I don't like. For example, I'm a big gamer. I like to, buy a game and then that's it. My kid is not like that. For him, it's completely normal to be spending money. And I think, I could see, I really like what Recast was building around that with, virtual credits. I mean, you're going to spend your virtual credits on, if it's a big content, you're going to spend more. If it's a small content, if it's a big league, it's more expensive than a small league, and so on. I think you're going to see much more innovative ways of monetizing on top, or, or besides the traditional subscription model, because that one will still be in trouble because of churn being very high and much higher than the rates that we've seen in the 90s.
And you mentioned Recast. Andy Mickle is a friend, so I followed them from the beginning. So, okay, Sebastien, that was cool. By the way, you gave me an idea to do an episode just on gaming, and I'm not a gamer. I just introduced my son to FC24. I have a lot of comments about the iPad version. So let's do a different episode, not for Retention Zone, on that, because I need to understand better.
Absolutely.
I'm a bit shocked. Va bene. So thank you, Sebastien. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. That was a pleasure.